Hi everyone, and very welcome to this first event on the Nordic Pavilion at COP28. I'm very honored to be here with you to have this very important discussion on youth inclusion in UNFCCC. My name is Lise Kjørman Nygaard, and I'm the Danish Youth Delegate to UN on Climate and Biodiversity. And I think that right now we are here at a very critical point dealing with climate issues. I think that's very clear for all of us. And I hope that in this panel it's also very clear that we need to act fast, and the involvement of young people is not just a good idea, but as necessary. Young people are not just the leaders of the future, they are the leaders of right now. Young people bring fresh ideas, energy, and a strong commitment to making things better. They are on the front lines of climate impacts, making changes in all of our communities and pushing for crucial action. Therefore, I think that ignoring the voices of the youth is not anymore an opportunity. In this event, with our dear panel, we will explore why involving young people is not just a good thing, but something that we must do. Let's together understand how young people can be included in the crucial processes happening here at COP. I look forward to this great discussion that we have ahead of us. And I wanted to start by thanking our panel for coming. And let's begin this important conversation with some opening remarks of all of you. So I would like you to share your experiences with youth involvement in UNFCCC. Jasmine, do you want to go ahead? Maybe say a bit about yourself and your role of being here at COP.
Hello, thank you for having me. So my name is Jasmine. I'm the Austrian Youth Delegate. And we have quite a big program. So we have two youth delegates, the junior youth delegate. That's me, and David is also here. And we also have two seniors that are mentoring us. And we also have two communications experts that are covering social media. And this year we're also financing a person from Global South, so Ibiza. And yeah, it's quite a big program, actually the biggest one in the EU. And our role is, we're officially part of the delegation, so we are having regular meetings with our delegation and also with Austrian politicians. And we're also doing a lot of media work, so doing interviews in press and covering social media, and also meeting with civil society and youth representatives from Austria and from all over the world.
Thank you very much. And then to you, Ibiso.
Nice being here. Thank you so much. My name is Ibiso Ikromowie from Nigeria. I'm actually the focal person for the Global South, sponsored by the Climate Austria team. Excited to be here. I'm actually the chairperson, partnership and public relations lead of the Commonwealth Ocean Youth Working Group under the Commonwealth Secretariat. I'm also the executive director of Grassroots to Global Sustainable Development Network in Nigeria, where we carry out grassroots actions, teach people about climate change and actually try to bridge the gap in marginalization of rural communities who have not had light for over a decade, by giving out solar lamps to the students and then possibly creating solar hubs very soon. And then I also work with YSDN, which is a Youth Sustainable Development Network, where we implement projects around energy, and we also implement projects around climate education, incorporating climate education into our curriculum in Lagos, Nigeria. And then, of course, we also do things around on sustainability as well. And yesterday we were invited to the dinner with the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, where we had a conversation on loss and damage and phasing out fossil fuels. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And to you, Maria?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. And thanks so much for inviting me as well. My name is Maria Samuelsen, and I am the head of delegation, the chief negotiator from Denmark. And we've been, I have the pleasure of Lisa and Markus and my delegation and my delegation meetings in the morning. And we appreciate that cooperation very much. In the Danish team, we've had youth delegates for quite a while. And I was also previously a part of the negotiations team working on climate finance, and remember having youth delegates along in the negotiations to provide both kind of an exchange of views and ping pong a little about how we see the negotiations, but also experiencing it for the first time as well. I This was when I started in the team. It was one of the first jobs I had, and for me, coming into this framework, so from a personal experience, quite overwhelming. So I remember having youth delegates there who also perhaps had a bit of the same experience, and we could share on that as well. So thanks so much for having me, and looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you, Maria. And yeah, I agree. I think we have a really good collaboration in the Danish delegation. That's very nice.
I'm not asking you to say that.
Yeah, so thanks to all of you for sharing a bit about your roles. And as we can hear, you all have quite some experience with youth engagement in UNFCCC. But now I would like to dig a dip deeper into why it even is important to have this inclusion. So Ibiso, would you maybe like to start on that? Why do you think it is important to have young people here at COP and representing young people?
Okay, thank you so much once again. I believe young people are the future, and if we must have sustainability achieved, we need the voices of young people, we need the ideas of young people. And so if you look through some of the innovations we have right now when it comes to technological advancement and development as well, we could see that young people are doing so much, coming up with creative ideas on ocean conservation, cleaning up the oceans and the likes of it. Even when it comes to the movements we see on climate change, you see young people at the forefront of the movement, because we are going to be inhabiting Earth, in the longest time. And so it's important to have young people, at the table. It's important to have young people part of the UNFCCC processes, where we get to share our ideas with the UNFCCC and then see how those ideas can be, converted into actions, meaningful actions, that at the long run we can actually achieve what we want when it comes to sustainability. And so as young people, our fresh ideas are very important. And so these people we have right now, we call them the climate elders in Nigeria, and they have a huge role to play when it comes to building our capacity as young people. We may not have all the experiences, but if we must take over from them, which we will be doing, of course, because we are the future, I think they need to incorporate us, or we need to be included in the UNFCCC processes, where we get to build our capacity, gain some hands-on experience, which we will need, to fill in those positions in the coming days. So, of course, as young people, we need to have our ideas out there, and for us to be heard, we need to be also involved. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. I think we are a lot of young people here in the room, and of course we all agree that it's very important for us to be involved. But I think it would also be really nice to hear your perspective on this, Maria, because you're a bit of from the other side than what we are.
Yeah, so I think actually I will want to start back in 2019, where we in Denmark had what we now call the climate election. We had an election in Denmark where one of the main topics was climate change. And it ended up in an election result and some results after the election from the new government that were very progressive on the issue of climate. And I think one of the reasons was for the young voices of Denmark, the youth of Denmark, taking the streets, asking for more ambition. And I think, we've had youth delegates as part of the Danish delegation also before that, but I think there was a realization that this involves, we should have known that way before, but it became very apparent that this just involves everyone, and especially the youth. So I think that has led to more engagement and more focus on the inclusion of youth in climate policies in Denmark. We've established a youth council, and we've also continued and keep developing the youth programs and involvement of youth in the UN negotiations. And I think for us it's a two-way street. Of course, I agree very much that the voices and the inputs from the youth is so important also for our position making. Taking that into account, Denmark and Austria negotiate through the EU, so obviously that's where we get our voices heard in the first place. But having that youth perspective included in the EU positions is so important, and we get that primarily through our youth delegates and our youth engagement. So that's one side, which is very important. The other side, of course, is also that it's also a chance for us to show our youth delegates how we work. How do we meet every morning? How do we coordinate? How does it work with the EU positions? What is the work that we do when we are here? How do we engage with other negotiation groups, the Cartagena Dialogue and the other groups that we are part of. So I think it's kind of a knowledge exchange that goes both ways. At least I hope that's also how our youth delegates see it. And I'm not asking you to respond to that, but yeah.
Okay, then I won't respond to that. Okay, then I would like to ask you, Jasmine, because I think, of course, when we are the youth, we think that we should be involved. But why is it that our generation is more important than the elderly or any other generation?
Well, I completely agree with my speakers before. So, youth has always been at the forefront of the climate movement, and we've changed elections, as you said. And still, it's young people pushing for climate action. And that's why it's so important to have young people here to make their voices heard and to have young people have a seat at the table. So yeah, and one of the biggest obstacles at the COP is to have a seat at the table, so to be admitted to COP, to even get a badge, and it's really hard for young people. So I believe this, like, one of the biggest pros of being a youth delegate is just having a badge, having a party badge, having access to the negotiation rooms, which most young people don't have. Most of the young people are outside in the green zone or cannot attend COP at all because they don't have badges and they don't have financing, and that's a big problem. So I'm very lucky to be a youth delegate and to be financed by the ministry, to get a badge by the ministry, and to have access to these rooms. And it's also our responsibility to make the voices of young people heard. So we have been meeting with lots of young people in Austria. There was the ALCO, the local conference of youth, where young people put up the demands for climate policies for COP28. And our role is just to amplify these voices, to amplify these demands and to bring them to the negotiators. Because it's just so important to make these voices heard. Because our generation is the one that's going to be most affected by the climate crisis, and we're going to have to deal with the consequences. So yeah, I think that's why it's so important to have youth involved in the UNFCCC process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think most of all in this room would agree on that, so thanks for sharing. And now you digged already a bit into how your program is working and that you are a part of the national delegation, being a youth delegate, and you have this badge to get in almost anywhere, or at least a lot of places. But can you share a bit more about what is the pros and cons of participating as a youth delegate and not as any other structure?
So, as mentioned, logistically, it's easier. It's easier to get in and to have access to information. And this is really important to have these informations. So, we're in exchange with our delegations. We are in the negotiating rooms. We're at plenaries. And we're also doing media work. So, we try to tell people in Austria, and especially young people via social media, what is happening at this COP. What is being negotiated. And I think this is one big probe, and within our delegation we can be really free, we can be really critical also in media, but I know that not all youth delegate programs are this free to speak so freely. And so it depends a lot on politics as well. So we have elections the following year, and we don't know how it's going to be after that, if we can still speak freely to the media, if we can still criticize Austrian climate policies, or if we're constricted in a way. So that's, a bit of downside to this. And also, we're not allowed to take part in demonstrations because we're a part of the official delegation. So this is also something we cannot do. And I think this is why it's so important that the youth delegates are in exchange with youth from civil society, because we have a lot of information, but we cannot do that many actions. So it's really important to have this exchange.
Mm-hmm. And Ibiso, you are here as a youth representative, kind of from the civil society, so a bit with a different role than Jasmine. So what do you think is the pros and cons of participating in the way that you are participating here at COP?
Okay, thank you once again. So for me, as one of the civil society organizations in COP, she has said, a lot of political stuff has to go in. You have to be very, very diplomatic of what you say, because you don't want to go back and someone is like, why did you say that on national TV? And all of that. So we have to be very, very diplomatic of what we say, and we have to be very wise as well, so you can go home, and be free as well. So for me, I think like she said, the challenge of going into the negotiation room, I don't think we are really well represented in negotiation rooms as Africans or young people from the African continent or from the global south. We don't even have, most of us don't have party badges. We have just observer badges, which is a restriction to our inputs. I talked about how I joined virtually last year, and with COP27, which happened in Egypt, and I was just scrolling through the online pages. I just watch, like we are doing right now, I just watch people have panel sessions, but I couldn't really make input, and I'm here this year, and I'm looking forward to making so much input, but at the same time, there's this restriction to negotiation rooms, to give my recommendations and all of that. But what I also appreciate is the fact that I have these kind of side events where I could talk, and then, of course, the videos and all can be shared to my country delegations, and also to some radio houses and TV houses who would help amplify what we're talking about right now, and then see how we can have such opportunities, just like Jasmine has talked about, and being sponsored by your country as a delegate. I think that's something I look forward to, that my country does, open up more opportunities for youth to be sponsored, by Nigeria and from the Global South to attend such meetings, get their voices heard, and of course, bring back some recommendations for the country's growth. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe, Jasmine, can you tell a bit more about this whole process that you two have been in with, that your program is sponsoring Ibizu's program? How has that all worked out for you? How did it come in place?
It's really important to have voices from the Global South included, because we're not only advocating for Austrian youth, but for youth in general, because it affects us all over the globe. And Austria is one of the richest countries in the world, so we have the responsibility also to share this and to bring young voices from the Global South to the table. So I'm really lucky to have you. And,
yeah.
And I believe it's like with feminism, there was the first wave of feminism that said we need to bring women to the negotiating table. And then there was the second wave of feminism asking, what kinds of women? And it's the same with youth. So we're still, I think, at some point at the stage that we're saying youth has to be included, but we also need to ask the question, which youth is included? Because there are lots of youth delegate programs within the EU and European countries, richer nations. But a lot of nations in the Global South don't have the money to send even negotiators, that many negotiators. And they don't have the opportunity to send youth delegates as well. And I think that's why it's so important to finance young people from the Global South. But at the same time, there are six Austrian youth delegates, young person from Austria, and only one person from Nigeria. So it's still not balanced yet. And Austria is a really small country compared to Nigeria as well. So we really need to bring the voices from the Global South as well, because we're affected in different ways. So for instance, loss and damage is something that really affects you, but doesn't affect us that much in Austria yet. So that's just one example why it's so important to have young people from the Global South here like you.
Thank you very much for sharing that and giving us some insights in how this all works. In a few minutes, we will open for some questions from the audience, so prepare yourself if you have any. But first, I would like to ask you, Maria, because now you are in this position where you are a big part of the Youth Delegate program. But what do you think is the pros and cons of that program versus young people being here from the civil society?
Yeah, so I think both groups have a right of their own. I mean, there's no doubt that we need civil society to create the pressure on us negotiators to get our act together and start moving. And I think civil society has an important role to play there. But I think youth delegates, of course, also have to be a bit of an ambassador for this way of working, the multilateral system. And emphasizing that while it might not be perfect, and you definitely don't have to agree with everything that's going on in it, it's still the best tool we have to deal with this issue. And I think that's where youth delegates might find themselves in a bit more of a difficult position, because you might agree with the voices on the street, but you still have to be in the process and kind of play by the process rules. And I can imagine that might be a bit tough being in that position. But I think both dimensions is important, and of course youth delegates can bring those voices inside the negotiations team and start pushing from the inside as well. So I think it works very well together and complements each other in a very good way.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And I can say, as a Danish youth delegate, I totally recognize what you're saying, that sometimes it can be a bit hard that we have to represent all the youth of Denmark, because of course that makes it, that we have to say something different than what the civil society can say. So I also think that it's very good that we have both and that we can complement each other, and I think we should be even better and strive even more to have a stronger connection between those two ways of participating here at COP. But now to the audience. Do you have any questions for this dear panel? Mathilde?
Question. So first of all, I'm thinking one of the reasons we have to have youth delegates is because our countries are supposed to represent all of their different groups, right, including youth. But maybe the reason we have to have youth delegates, and the reason that many youth prioritize to go here, like also youth activists and organizations, is because you don't feel enough heard in your national context, right? So I'm wondering a bit if you have any reflections on that. Why is it that youth isn't heard enough, or why is it that our demands, maybe they're listened to, but they're not really done anything about, right? That's why we have to keep coming here. So I'm wondering if you have any reflections on that, like the actual policy changes. And then second of all, one thing is youth, but secondly, we don't see a lot of children here yet. And so how can we represent children and also future generations in a better way?
Repeat the question, please.
Okay, that was a long question. Okay, I can repeat that question, and then for the next question we will give you a microphone, I think. So the question is about that one of the reasons maybe why we have, we as youth need to go to the COP is because we don't feel represented in our national operations, and that we don't feel that we are heard back in our home country, so we need to go here to push. But I think the big question is, how do we represent the children as well? Because now we can see that there is luckily more and more young people attending COP, but how do we represent the children and the ones who are too young maybe to be here? So how can we represent those voices at COP? What do you think, Jasmine?
Okay, so I think I'm gonna cover both questions now. So first, why is youth still not heard? I believe that we're kind of lobbyists for the youth, and we're just lobbying for youth demands like having a livable future. But there are other lobbies as well, like the oil lobby, especially at this conference here. So it's just like, what financial means does the youth have compared to oil lobbies, to meat industry, to other lobbies? And I think that's one problem. So we have morals, we have like the right to a future, we have human rights, and this is something, it's really important, but it's just kind of hard to compete with other lobbies. And that's why it's so important to have youth voices represented at the table as well, to have youth negotiators, not only youth delegates that are somewhere in the back, and to have more young people here, and also to have children here, like you said. And I think most people of us, we're still above the age of 18, so we're not really children anymore. And in Austria, it's not possible to become a youth delegate when you're under 18. That's because, a lot of logistical requirements as well. But actually, the day before we had a flight to Dubai, we were at a UNICEF event in Austria, and there were lots of children and young people under 18 that were doing a creativity contest. So there were children at the age of, I think, like 6 to 17 years old, and they were drawing paintings and writing texts, performing songs, and most of them were about the climate crisis and how they picture the future. And actually, they gave us a book with all of these paintings and texts, so we brought it here with us. And we always try to remember that these are the voices we really do represent, and it's harder for 6-year-olds to be at a conference. That's clear, but that's why it's important to have youth delegates that are really meeting with youth and having also children's demands heard, because a child might have different demands that a young person that is starting their career maybe. So that's why it's so important to meet with these people and always have it in our minds that these are persons we are representing. And to be at this event, it really gave me a lot of energy, because those are people we are fighting for. Future generations.
Maria?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a bit. I mean, I'm not going to speak to whether you feel heard at home, because, I mean, that's obviously up for you to decide if you feel that your national politicians listen to the extent that they should. But I think it's so important, even if you felt heard at home, to keep coming here, because this is a global challenge, and we can only tackle it if we work together. And Denmark represents 0.1% of global emissions. So, I mean, even if we did everything we could in Denmark, it wouldn't make a difference in the global sphere. So we need that push, and we need that. We need. We need people to keep coming and applying that pressure here at COPs as well, even if national governments are perfect at listening to young people.
Yeah, do you want to share something else, Lisa? Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so you talked about children involvement as well, and I think that's one thing Yongo, which is the youth constituency for UNFCCC, has done so much work on. I think prior to COP, there was this statement for children that we were working on, and I made my contribution to that statement. We were looking at child's rights and all of that, and their inclusion too in the UNFCCC processes. And we discovered that one of the challenges we would have with having them come to COP is how do we manage children, because it's one thing to just bring them here, it's another thing to be sure of their safety, and also guide them, on how to go about amplifying what they want and making their demands as well. So some of the things I thought about during that period was how do we have like a little bit of conference within our region for the children, and then we get their voices via different means, as maybe a video, or maybe as quotes from young people that we could just display when it comes to side events like this, where we have already a screen, and then we could say these are the voices of young people, and these are what they are advocating for. So we may not be able to have all the children on ground, but we could have 1 or 2 representatives of children who would come in with guardians, and then the rest can just, their voices can just be amplified with video slides, and or quotes or picture slides of what they are actually advocating for. And of course, we could also have them write their own statements, which we can help bring, to COP, and then help and see how the leaders, can buy into the ideas of these young people, because truth be told, they are going to be the youths very soon. Most of them are 17 years old, and in the next year they're going to be 18, and of course they will come to COP. So there's this anticipation of we want to come to COP, and we want to also have our voices heard. But right now, what are we doing, or what are they allowing us to do? And so these are the kind of leader conferences we can have in our region to build their capacity, pending when they come to COP. So thank you.
Yeah, and I also think that your question about how we can represent children is a big question for everyone. Like, how do we represent someone who is not here? And that's doesn't only account for children, but also, as you are both saying, that we need more young people from the global south. What can we do to represent them better? Because I think we can never tell their stories. They should be the ones telling their stories. But now that they can't, because they are not allowed here, or maybe children shouldn't be at COP, I don't know. But the system is something quite specific. So how do we take their stories into this room in the best way? And I think it's always about doing it in the most honest way and telling, for example, if you can have a video, I think that's a really good idea, because then you have the children themselves saying the things and not us interpreting what they said and then trying to give it forward. But thank you very much for the question. Do we have other questions from the audience? Wait a second.
Perfect. Yeah, I was thinking about your reflection on last day we heard that Simon Steele, the executive director for COP or for UNFCCC, he said that it's important to listen to youth, but right now it's us, him or other at his generation that is in power, so it's them who have to do something. I'm wondering if there is an obstacle with youth saying that climate is only our responsibility, or it's something that our generation has, that it's important actually to put both, that it's something that we as youth see as a high demand, but it's not us that are in power right now, and it will not be fixed when we will get in power, so it's them who are in power right now who have to do something. So do we need to have like a change of language to set this as a focus? Yeah, it's just to hear your reflection on his speech.
So who would like to start on that one?
I think I wasn't really clear with the question.
Okay, so I think the question is like, because I think Marcus and I both a lot hear, what do you say, like adult people saying, oh, it's so nice that you, the young generation, are taking this issue of climate change on your shoulders, and that you're trying to do something, and that you will be in the forefront and you will be the next generation doing something. But that when you have this language, you're also a bit of like pushing away the responsibility. So for example, my father says that a lot to me, that he's so proud of me doing all of this, and then I'm telling him, yeah, thank you, but when you say that, it also sounds like that he won't do anything. He's just relying on me or our generation doing something. So how can we change that language? Yeah, I think that's part of the question. Yeah?
Maybe I can kick off, and then you can supplement, because I'm sure you have some very good perspectives on this. But I think it's a good point that we shouldn't take responsibility away from the ones in power now. I mean, it's their obligation to act on this, but I think they can do it in a more informed way when we have youth telling the stories and informing on how much they are affected by this. So I think it's not really a matter of taking away responsibility, but making sure that it's informed and it's in a way that also understands the urgency and I mean, you guys are voters in the countries you come from, so or many places. So you also have quite a lot of power, and I think that's also the example that I had from Denmark in the beginning that really showed that there is a certain amount of power in using that voice to also influence the politicians that should make the decisions.
Yeah.
I believe it's important to have the voices of young people heard, but in the end, at the end of the day, it comes down to decisions taken. And yeah, it's about power. Who's in power? And as you said, we can change elections. If we just look at the demography in Europe, lots of older people are living there. So yesterday I talked to a person living in Egypt, and she came to Europe for the first time, to Austria and to Germany, and she told me, like, in Egypt everyone's our age, but when I went to Austria there are so many old people on the streets. So yeah, it was crazy for her because yeah, of course, we can vote at the age of 18 or 16 maybe. So there are lots of people that are affected and that still cannot vote, that still cannot make their voice heard, that do not have even the power to vote. And so that is why I believe that sometimes the youth demands are much closer to demands to people from the Global South, because in the Global South, people are way younger. So in average, there are countries where people are 30 years in average or even less. And so still, lots of them are not allowed to vote, so the power lies with older people still. And yeah, it's hard to change that. I wouldn't say let a 6-year-old vote, but at the same time, we need to question those power structures and also question why the power, especially in the global north, in Europe, for example, lies so much with older people, and how young people can make their voices heard and also be included in the decisions taken at the end of the day.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, so I think sharing my own perspective, it will be on, you talked about changing the language, which for me, if the power doesn't lie with the young people and it lies with the older people, it would just basically be how do we educate those older people on what is really important for them to vote upon. Because when I read the story of, is it Lester Thunberg, the person who started the movement for Fridays for Future, yeah, and she actually had that challenge, which made her begin the movement. And you saw how she dragged young people into it. And before you know, even the older people began to see reasons on why the movement was really important. So if we cannot be there, in those positions and then vote as well, we could have our older people come into knowledge or come into the light of what we are trying to do. And for us in the Global South, especially in Nigeria, what we try to do with these things such as climate education is educating the young ones. And so if we educate the young ones, it's easier for them to educate their parents and their older people at home, because you would keep key into the interest of your young person. So let's say, for example, before I came to COP28, my dad asked me the question of, what are you going to do in COP28? What are you going to do in Dubai? And I tried so hard to look for the simplest way to explain climate change and all of that to him in a way he would understand. Though he worked with the ministry for a while, and he had knowledge about the MDGs, that was the Millennium Development Goals, but he didn't really see the transition into the SDGs because he left the office and all of that. So I had to look out for the best possible language, to explain to him what climate change and what it is all about. And by so doing, I have influenced his mindset on what it is. And I believe when he goes into some rooms to have some discussions or some negotiation, he would see it in the light to which I have explained it to him. And he will also be acquainted with the reality of it, because explaining it to him in a way where he can relate to the changes around his environment and how it impacts him and impacts us as his children as well, and the entire society. I think that's the first way to go about it. And then we don't have to crack our heads too much on how they, take up those decisions and make those negotiations, up there in the political parties and in the political room. So I think that's one way to change the language structure. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And I also think that even though I totally agree with what you say, Jasmine, that in Europe our generation is quite small. We don't, we're not that many young people compared to how many adult or old people there is. I think that we can still affect them a lot. I remember during the last election in Denmark, the Green Youth Movement had a big campaign where they tried to convince all young and children to talk with their parents and their grandparents about their fears and how they see the future with climate change, because they thought that even though you can't vote, you can affect a lot of other people. And I think it will always affect a grandmom, mother more when it comes from their grandchildren, instead of coming from IPCC or something else. It always affects us more when we know the person and we can see the sadness in their eyes. So I think we should remember that we can affect a lot of people. But now we are coming to an end. And I think that we have all agreed that it's a good idea to have youth inclusion in UNFCCC. I'm happy for that. But I would like to ask each of you if you should give one tip for others to how we can enhance the youth inclusion and have more young people here and maybe more youth delegate programs in Europe and in Global South. How can we do that? Do you have one tip for others that they can try to follow for that? Ibiso, please go ahead.
Okay, so I think one of the things I would suggest, or I would say, is the fact that private sectors and even governing bodies need to have youth programs, and an advisory youth council for the young people. We see that happen with some country. For us in Nigeria, we have the Dutch consulate, we have the Netherlands consulate, and most of them are already having this youth advisory council where we have a focal person who talks with the youths across different civil society organizations and NGOs, and then reports back to them on the pressing needs of the young people and the recommendations and solutions to some of the climate change issues we have. And so if we have such programs, or if we have such advisory council, by these private sectors or governing bodies, it helps to include youths, into what they do, into the activities, and into sustainability as a whole. I think that's one way to have youths included. Thank you.
Thank you. And to you, Maria, I think, for example, if there's someone sitting out there looking online and then they are from a European country or another country not having youth delegate programs, how can they affect the prosperity of having that in the future?
So I think a lot of this comes with having a good dialogue with the responsible ministry and asking these questions. And I think that's also how it started. In Denmark, it's primarily through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who have then brought it out to other ministries. And I think having an ambassador in a ministry kind of pushing for this is really helpful. But I think I was actually quite struck with the point made on this not being very representative in the UNFCCC, and perhaps there should be some room for looking at how we can organize it in the UNFCCC process, perhaps to include youth in a different way. I mean, it could be through the UNFCCC Secretariat or something that also funds participation from developing countries. So perhaps it should be more organized, really, to make sure that everyone is represented on an equal basis.
Yeah. Thank you, because we can see that there's a lot of European youth and not as much from the Global South. So I think there's a big problem with the financial situation, who can afford to bring youth delegates and who can't. What would your best tip be, Jasmine?
So I believe in a national level, it's important to include youth, for instance, via national youth councils, to have youth delegate programs, and also to have the youth delegate programs include people from the Global South, because we're the ones having the financial means to do so. So I think this would be really important, especially for the national delegations, to advocate for that. And also on a European level. So this year, for the first time, we have European youth demands. So what we proposed is that every European country has youth delegates. We've proposed that before, and actually, in fact, some countries have youth delegate programs for the first time this year, like Germany, Slovakia, Slovenia, for instance. So I think this helps, and by 2025, it would be really good for every European country to have youth delegate programs, and ideally including people from the Global South as well. And on the international level, I think it would be important for the UNFCCC to give badges to young people, more badges to young people, have a quota, and also finance that. So financing for youth inclusion just needs to rise in order so that we can participate meaningfully.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all the tips and all your great insights and the good questions from the audience. Now I would like to conclude this session. I hope that we all learned something new and that we will work the next 2 weeks to strengthen the voice of the youth. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. It's an honor to be here on stage in the Nordic Pavilion during the second day of COP28 in Dubai. And we're very happy to see you all here.
And welcome to all of those who are watching the live stream or listening to the podcast. Very nice to have you.
On this episode of the Nordic Talks Live Podcast, we will turn our focus towards youth representatives from different sides of the world, bringing non-Nordic perspective into the Nordic Pavilion, discussing collaboration across borders to enable a sustainable and equitable future for all. My name is Unnur Þórdís Kristjánsdóttir, and I'm the UN Youth Delegate on Climate Change for Iceland. I'm a young professional working in sustainability at Controllant, a company with the aim to eliminate waste in global pharma supply chains. I'm very honored to be joined here today with my fellow Icelandic UN Youth Delegate, Finnur Ríkharð Andrason. Finnur chairs the Icelandic Young Environmentalists Association. And last but not least, we have here on stage with me Augustine Ocaña, an Ecuadorian climate change maker. Augustine is the chairperson of the Global Youth Coalition, His relentless dedication spent 7 years embodying sustainability, from designing a sustainable coffee farm in Galapagos Islands to empowering women through innovative business solutions. Welcome, Augustine. The climate is getting warmer. How do you see the issue evolving in Ecuador? Are people concerned about the direct effects of climate change?
Hi everyone. Yes, thank you for that, Finur and Unur. It's definitely warm, as we can feel it already. So yeah, in Ecuador, before, when I was a kid, we don't have seasons like in the global north, especially in Europe, but we can say like we were having at least summer and winter. And I remember when I was a kid, I used to go like in August and so on with my dad to the mountains, because at that point the wind was like stronger, so we can use the kite. And I was having this moment with this connection with my family, climbing, feeling nature, playing with the kite. And nowadays, this is not possible anymore for the kids on this time, because as the climate temperatures are rising, the pressure is going lower, and that means that there will be like less winds. And this is something that science is already like proving that, and you understand that if you think like in a point of view, how important is the wind and pollen, also for us to keeping us fresh, and it's getting warmer and warmer, not just in Latin America, but in general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you're talking about the sort of impact of climate change, and of course they're very unevenly distributed. And another thing we see that is unevenly distributed is the ability to actually implement mitigation solutions. So I'm curious, how do you feel that in the Nordic context, now that we're in the Nordic Pavilion, how can we reflect on the responsibility of the Nordic countries when it comes to implementing or assisting countries with lower abilities to implement mitigation? What is the responsibility of the Nordic countries?
Yeah, well, nowadays, first developed countries, let's say, they are promoting the fact that you are getting to net zero. But we cannot forget about the responsibility that we have. Science is proof that no matter if you are producing no CO2 nowadays, you still have the cumulative CO2 that you produce during the years that you get to reach the point of development that you have. And therefore, transfer of technology, because you reach to a point that you develop certain science together with Latin Americans that are always involved in these kind of projects. And we have, as youngsters, to promote the transfer of technology. And I think it's a way that where we can start. But this doesn't mean that this should be another door where we use these spaces to increase the depth on the name of exchanging technology. Mm-hmm. Because then the global south is still drowning in debt, and we cannot continue on development, and we still are using like old or antique technology, and that means oil, contamination, technology that is not effective in the CO2 that you are producing and the energy that you are becoming.
Yeah, I think we need to share some knowledge across the borders, and maybe to add a little bit of context from Iceland. Iceland has a long record of sharing knowledge, especially with the developing world. Iceland has run a school for developing countries for decades in geothermal power generation. This Iceland would also need to do to implement a school for carbon capture technology, so the world can in unity scale those solutions. What the developing world always needs is not only knowledge, but the know-how of developing projects, financing them and operate. So the biggest way Iceland could help is the way we would help the private developers in setting up firms to generate geothermal baseload power, to capture CO2 and store it or convert to generate hydrogen with green power solutions and turn it into green fertilizer. Maybe a question to you, Augustine. Do you think Ecuador is equipped to implement these solutions?
Yes, definitely, and not just Ecuador, Latin America.
Yeah.
For example, we have the case of, I have to read the name, Mariana Perez from Colombia. She created a cool air. And this patented technology that was developed in Latin America right now is already cleaning the air, collecting CO2 and CO2 equivalent not just collecting, then also using this carbon that we are collecting from air and using it into sustainable material. And this technology was developed 100% in Latin America. That means that if we receive certain knowledge, certain technology, we have the capacity, we do have the capacity to manage it and maybe even improve it. And that's the way of going on, collective working as one planet.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm curious, just as a side note perhaps, because you're now the chairperson of the Global Youth Coalition, and I think it's such a great initiative, and I'm curious because we talk about the importance of the Nordic countries, for example, needing to transfer this technology, transfer the knowledge, and provide assistance to the countries that don't have the capacity currently to implement certain solutions. How does the Global Youth Coalition view this problem, and what can we as young people do to push for this change? Because it's easy to talk about it, but how can we push for this actually to be implemented?
Yeah, well, I believe that the Global Youth Coalition is actually a great example of it. And with facts, during last year I met someone from the Global North, Alexis. She's from the Oxford Net Zero, a branch from Oxford University. And together with the Oxford University, we find a gap of knowledge because there's a lot of youngsters that are coming to these spaces, to the UNFCCC conferences. And at least myself last year, even though that I'm a biotechnology engineer, that I have publication in bioinformatics, I came here and you hear so many different names, data, a lot of acronyms, and I was overwhelmed after 2 weeks and I felt that I could not do as much as I want. Even though that we are always like, what do we want? Climate justice. Yes, but how do you want to implement it? And for that, we need knowledge. So what we did with the University of Oxford, we launched an application which was well received with 10,000 applicants from 178 countries. And at the end, we trained 4,500 people from 177 countries. And at least 3,000 of them complete the 12 sessions that we had, and each of one was 2 hours. Mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage, litigation in general. And now that I'm working, and 3 days before I found a guy from China, Canada, and we were having a discussion about climate finance. And what do you know about climate finance? Someone asked, and he said, actually, I was going through the UNFCCC information, but there's so many pages that I couldn't understand anything. At the end, I watched a 90-minute video that I found called Climate Finance, and it was actually the program that we run. You can find it in YouTube. And in 2 hours, he kind of at least had the knowledge to understood and properly advocate for change by learning. And that's a great example of how we can collaborate. It was just a random talk, and for the youngsters that are hearing me right now, every moment that you have the chance to talk with someone, use it properly because you don't know who might you be talking at that moment, and trust what the cause that you are pushing for. If you do it, of course, with a plan, with a strategy, with a group, with a team, but confidence of what you are doing is not just activism anymore. You are being a special member of the change. You are a change maker. And what I'm advocating here as a person right now, as an individual, that we have to kind of like go from activism, what is good. We make ourselves being heard. What happened in 2019? We were protesting, it's a climate emergency. Then 2020, the amount of finance that was liberated, that was freed, in 2020 increased in contrast of the last years. And why is that? Because our parents, our grandparents are hearing us. So I feel it's how the Global Youth Coalition is doing. And just ask me later on at the end, what are we doing next year? I would love to share. It's like a surprise.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people are climate curious and want to do something to change the situation, but they're often overwhelmed with everything happening and what they can do to change things. But I think it's definitely a great idea to have this organization to come together and provide support to each other in making things happen, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious because you mentioned the complexity of climate finance in the climate space, and especially at these conferences. And it's interesting as well that yesterday, on the first day of COP28, that the Loss and Damage Fund was finally adopted or launched, essentially. And we see that there's some money coming in already. I'm curious what you think, again, when coming back to the Nordic countries' responsibility in the climate crisis. What are your thoughts on the Nordic countries' financial responsibility when it comes to responding to the climate crisis?
Okay, again with facts. Yeah, the global north, or let's say the Nordic countries, are already not producing as much CO2 as before, but we cannot forget the accumulative carbon that we have. And nowadays, just imagine this. We have a 100 pages book, and 92 pages of this book, the author is the global north. 8 pages of this book, the author is the global south. And the name of this book is Polluters. 92% of the pollution that we are producing right now comes from the global north. And even though the global south is and might sound like a bit like, you know, a repeated old speech, yeah, the global south and the depth that we have, historical depth, but it's a fact. We are not polluting as much as the global north. And personally, as an individual, as Agustin, I don't like the global north, global south division. I really don't like it. I had the opportunity to have 1 year in Germany. I have a lot of friends from Europe. The fact that I'm so far able to manage as a chairperson the Global Youth Coalition is because I learned a lot from the Global North culture. Organization, being on time, not like today, but you know, yesterday I was on time. And it's because I got this chance, this privilege to exchange the culture with the Global North, and then I understood that it's just a geolocalization. If you think, like, let's zoom out, we are just one planet, and what does really mean north and south? If you think, like, where is up in the universe? Have you asked yourself that question? Where is the north in the universe? We are, let's say, yeah, from the point of the sun as a start, but there's hundreds of stars. So that's just tags that we have mentally. And we have to start forgetting this, at least our generations and intergenerational people that has a young heart, because this is not also like global north, global south, the youngsters, the older people. No, it's one planet, one mission, and we have to start advocating like that, as a global community. And we can do it because there's not just the Global Youth Coalition, there's tons of NGOs or countries that are already pushing forward in Africa, Asia, Latin America, in general. But we have to trustworthy, and in the Global South, something that we have a problem a lot is corruption. That's something that we are still have to work like a lot, but I don't want to touch that point. Let's just leave it like that.
Yeah, definitely the most climate vulnerable cities are the most affected by climate change and have little to cause this vulnerability. Climate change is also on top of the mind of young people. They were born into a world where climate change is the reality. It's affecting their everyday life, and their sense of security is at stake. Climate change is one of the most complex challenges we face, which requires collaborative solutions and reimagining how we live our lives. This requires new skill building in the education system to future-proof the job market. Do you see any opportunities in greening the education system in the global south? What skills do you think are needed in the generations to come? Not a small question.
Well, what the skills? First of all, Google what ChatGPT is. That's important, like AI. Again, like the Global Youth Coalition, there's Lujain over there from Egypt, part of the Egyptian delegation, the vice chairperson of the Global Youth Coalition. And it's like when we are having our meetings, it's 10 people, 20 people from different countries, plus at least we have involved 5 AIs in our programs. We have a guy that his name is Fred, is an AI, is taking notes from our meetings. Then I have Lupita, is the press conference people that is helping me. I give names to all of them because it's at least energy that is helping us. And in my beliefs, everything is energy. We are all nature. And programming, you have to know what to do with the storytelling. Even though that I'm speaking here, there's 10 people not looking at me but watching at their screens. So you need to know how to go to that screens and conquer that part. How? With well-done media content, not just like another video. You have to understand how to make them get the knowledge. 1.5 minutes is what you have per reel. So you have to go and do the script, make it compelling, make it like, the last years, somehow I have disconnected myself a bit of social media, but because of the project that we are launching next year, I'm start doing reels again. And then Lujane she's 18 years old and was sending me a message like, hey, Agustin, the reel that you just uploaded is amazing. Like, keep doing it. And for me as a 29 guy, I'm like, yes, at least she likes it. And that's something good. And there's people that is learning through this content. So again, storytelling, programming, English for sure. Maybe now it's time to start talking also Mandarin, Spanish. The biggest community of the world is Latin American. So let's go with that. But I think that if you can be your friend with the computer or with your phone, you can do everything now. Don't be afraid of technology. Use it for the good.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I think your point about storytelling is really important, and I think that's what a lot of people are focusing on here at COP is it's all about the narrative that we create, both in the side events, but also in the negotiation rooms. It's all about how you frame your goals and what you want. And you mentioned earlier the importance of empathy, and that, and I'm also really inspired by your vision of, let's stop talking about this divide between the global north and the global south, and that touches upon empathy as well. So I'm curious, what your view is on how we can use storytelling, whether it's digital storytelling or real life storytelling, to sort of increase the empathy of everyone within the climate space so we can overcome this division that we keep talking about between developed countries and developing countries.
Okay. So I was traveling during this year after COP27. I quit my job because I was having this meeting with Antonio Gutierrez in one of the roundtables. And he started the meeting telling us that, guys, we are losing the fight against climate change. And my heart was broken at that moment. I was asking myself, what do I have to do now? Because, somehow I was having a great job in the global north remotely. I was living on the beach, watching whales every day, jumping. But I was feeling that was not enough, and I could not hear the head of United Nations telling me in front of me, we are losing the fight, and then go back, work in something, and that's it, So I quit my job, and I started traveling around the Middle East, Europe as well. And I was with the Bedouins, somewhere close to Jordan. And I was sharing the other day the photo with my Habibi Lujane. We are talking a lot because of the global youth. And at the beginning, she was like, who are these guys? She didn't recognize myself there. And then I'm like, look closer. Because I was like with you guys having a tea with them. And I was so amazed that those guys look like my cousins. And I'm an indigenous from Latin America, and I was in the desert of Jordan with Bedouins, and the guy was just like, I could say, you are my brother. And if a photo can transmit the message to Lujane that we are the same, imagine what a well-done reel can do to hundreds and thousands of people. So storytelling is important, and there's a lot of bad people that is using it, as well as with AI. We are afraid, and I will push with AI a lot. We're afraid of that. So what's our duty as the good guys? We have to use it as well. We have to go and don't be afraid of try with the camera, because maybe she won't like it, but she might. So there's always a way of reaching people, but do it properly. don't do it like I do, because I don't always like do a script. I was telling you that.
Yeah.
But if you need it, like Unur, do it. Do the steps, do a drawing. What do you want to highlight? And then what you want to highlight, ask yourself, how is people already highlighting this? Climate change. We are about to disappear. No, that's boring. How I did last year, help me to save the beer, the chocolate, and avocados. So people is like, I do love beer, I do love chocolate. And it's a fact that if we continue in this way, cacao will be even more expensive than gold. So if you like chocolate, take your phone and start doing a storytelling with why climate change is something that we should be worried about.
Brilliant. Maybe just to wrap things up here today, what would be your message, Augustine, firstly to the political leaders in the Nordic countries, and secondly, the youth climate activists in the Nordics?
Yeah, so one of the slogans that we have is less words, more actions. And there's my friend from, I hope I'm not wrong, from Norway. And she's part of the youth delegation from Europe, and they wrap up a statement from the Global North youth delegations. And we will be hosting with the Global Youth Coalition some meetings by blocks. Las Americas, Europe, Asian, Africa, and we will be focusing 2 paragraphs. I just received the email yesterday from the team of someone in the German delegation that they are on the wheel of meeting with us. So it's not, I don't want to send like a message for 2030. I'm here. Let's talk. Let's do something. Let's not just write something in the documents that no one is reading. There's 878 documents when you enter to the UNFCCC website. I have not seen at least 1% of them. And I cannot do as much videos to read all of them, you know? So let's talk and let's make things happen because we have the capacity. One of the Global Youth Champs from the Global Youth Coalition is an MIT guy from Portugal. Lujane, 18 years old, is in the Egyptian delegation. Bianca, she got COVID in Bolivia, but she is a lawyer, and even though is helping us with the social media of the Global Youth Coalition. He just got graduated from his university. Yeah. So we have to take these people to the right places, and for that we need to talk, but talk with a purpose. Not just, I don't want the photo. I want things to be done together as a planet, not as we are separated, older generation, no, as a planet, as one community. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Augustine. I think there's nothing we could say to highlight better what you said. So I just want to repeat what you said about, you know, we're here, let's talk, let's do something together as a whole, as one planet. Thank you very much, Augustine, for coming to the Nordic Pavilion and speaking with us. Thank you, Uner, for co-hosting this with us. And everyone keep an eye out for the Global Youth Coalition.
If I can like just appropriate the space a bit. Next year we will be launching the Reforesting for Peace program initiative. We already got a small budget. If you have some, let me know. But this goes around the power of filmmaking and storytelling to push the nature-based solutions. So we want to train 5,000 youngsters around the planet. Yes, another capacity building program. But we also have the dream to provide 500 kits to youth-led NGOs, a drone, a GoPro. I don't know how you cannot say GoPro. Sorry, I'm not with them, but I don't know how to say that. Cameras and a phone. Because even though that we give the capacities, but we don't have the tools, we have nothing. If we receive books from Iceland of the technology, but we don't have access to the technology, we have nothing. We need the tools. And the Global Youth Coalition needs some budget for making that happen. So if someone in the streaming, go to the doubleYouth.co, contact us, take action at the Global Youth CO, and just write me, contact me. We are really looking forward to support the global youth. You are not supporting Agustin, you are not supporting Lujane, you are supporting the global youth, and we already proved that we can do it as we did this last year with the University of Oxford. Thanks.
Thanks, Augustine. Yeah, let's get the climate funding to the local initiatives where they really have an impact. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this event for the launch of the Nordic and Baltic Youth Policy Paper for COP. My name is Amalie Holmefjord, and I'm the youth delegate for Norway to the UNFCCC. We're excited to see you here all, and we will look at the recommendations on how to ensure a fair transition in the triple planetary crisis. So I just wanted to give you a little background to how these demands came about. We had a conference in October in Copenhagen called Youth Empowerment in Climate Action, Ensuring Gender Equality and a Fair Transition in the Triple Planetary Crisis. Quite the mouthful, but it's very inclusive and, yeah, very interesting. So, at our conference, we had a lot of different consultations with youth from primarily the Nordic and the Baltic region, but we also had representatives from Europe and international representatives. And what we discussed in our conference were some specific topics. We discussed indigenous peoples and Arctic minorities, just and inclusive transition, energy sector and innovation, legal and policy framework, and international cooperation. And from our consultations and discussions that we had, we created some specific recommendations. And at the end of our event, we presented them to some of the ministers in the Nordic Council of Ministers. And then later on, we've kind of worked more with these recommendations and condensed them into a list of youth demands that I will present to you now. Also, just wanted to mention that during the conference we had, we also were presented the outcomes of the African Youth Climate Assembly by our lovely Alphonse here, who is going to participate in the panel later. So really, in our demands, which really has, you know, quite a big focus on gender equality, you know, these recommendations, they broadly outline the priorities of youth in the Nordic and Baltic regions and Africa for how we can ensure a just transition in the triple planetary crisis. Okay, so our demands are the following. We urge Nordic and Baltic governments to, number one, recognize the Nordic and Baltic Youth Working Group for Climate and Environment as a Nordic-Baltic Youth Council. So, in practice, this means that we would like to participate in meetings and be consulted when the Nordic Council of Ministers have meetings. And we would like to also probably, you know, be able to have regular meetings with decision makers. Second demand, we want to ensure a respectful and solidary transition with full respect for gender equality, human rights, and the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. Incorporate local and indigenous practices and knowledge in environmental governance. So with this, we really want to, you know, focus that it's crucial that we as Nordic and Baltic countries push for these topics. I mean, gender equality, human rights. We are, you know, we've come very far when it comes to these topics, and we need to be, you know, in the front lines, pushing for other countries to do the same. Then, number three, implement measures for accountability in regards to large-scale environmental destruction by proposing and supporting an ecocide law in the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court as a region. So really, what we want to do with this is that if we put, you know, legal implications to, you know, the rights of the nature, climate, and the earth, we can work against destruction of the environment and the climate, as we're seeing today.
we want to commit to reaching the yearly $10 billion target on climate finance for each year in the period of 2020 to 2025. We urge the Nordic and Baltic countries to explicitly call out other developed countries who consistently fall short on contributing their adequate share of this budget. So as Nordic and Baltic countries, we do have, the historic responsibility, but also the capacity to work for a just transition. And it's crucial that we push for this. 5, we want to urge to show a bigger global leadership in the phase-out of all fossil fuels. By, for example, supporting the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty. And this could be a really concrete step that Nordic and Baltic countries could make in order to push forward. And making this step could really mean a lot, and showing, what we want to push for. Yes, number 6, recognize that as states in action to act to stop global warming or other forms of environmental destruction is itself a violation of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So also by putting it into law that the consequences that children and youth are going to face need to be, it needs to be, you need to get consequences for not, taking care of our rights as children and youth. Then we want to push for enable funding of youth-led and representative UNFCCC youth delegate programs for every Nordic and Baltic country. Additionally, advocate for youth delegates in all party states and support them by means of finance and knowledge transfer. So actually, in most of the Nordic and Baltic countries, we have youth delegates to the UNFCCC, and we also collaborate a lot with each other, and we've seen very fruitful outcomes of this. We also collaborate a lot with other European youth delegates, and we've even created our own position paper that we made for this year's COP. So we really see that it's very fruitful, and some of the Nordic countries have had these delegate programs for quite a long time, so we have a lot of knowledge on how to do this. So we should really push for other countries to do the same. 8, institutionalize youth in a meaningful way in decision-making processes to ensure involvement of youth throughout the whole process by giving youth mandate and long-term funded opportunities. Deliberate, seek out marginalized communities, including people with disabilities, indigenous people, and all genders. So we also need to recognize that as Nordic and Baltic youth, we're quite privileged in the way that we have funding and the possibility to attend these kind of events. But there's also a lot of youth that are not here, that are not able to go to COP. They don't have the funding or the support to go here. So we really want our countries to push for that. Then 9, ensure the representation of Sami youth and people in decision-making processes by including a Sami representative in the delegations to COP. So as the Nordic countries actually have, Sami people are the one indigenous group in Europe, and they are living in the Nordic countries. So we have a particular responsibility to ensure that they also have a voice. And unfortunately, their representation is limited in these areas and in these spheres. So we need to push for more involvement of them. And then lastly, we want to take an active role in the operationalization of the Loss and Damage Fund at COP28. The fund should be predictable, needs-based, obligatory, new, additional, grant-based, and accessible for affected communities. And now that the fund has been started, we really hope that also Nordic and Baltic countries will contribute to the fund. Okay, thank you so much. And now we're going to have a panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Amalia. Let me introduce myself shortly. My name is Kristina Smieszkova. I am a national youth delegate for Slovakia. And in my country, we've been organizing regional and national climate citizen assemblies for youth. And I'm here to advocate for more participative governance and for more youth engagement. And as a context setting for the panel discussion, I will just shortly present what the demands of the Slovak youth has been. Generally, I think that's also already something that Amalia has mentioned, you feel underrepresented in political processes. That's why we ask for more involvement and also education for youth. And when it comes to the approach to climate crisis, we recognize it as a very complex issue. And that is why the Slovak youth is calling for a combination of a bottom-up and top-down approach, where bottom-up we empower and support communities on a local level, because communities, they are able to adapt very quickly on a local level, and it is important to bring everyone on board for a transition. On the other hand, we also call for countries to act on a top-down level to really create conditions where sustainability is a norm and conditions for a just sustainable transition, so that sustainability can be priority in all different areas. What this means on an international level is calling for stricter and higher NDCs and national climate goals, which are compatible with the Paris Agreement, acting upon international agreements, and also showing a principle of solidarity from the global north towards the global south on an international level, meaning supporting actively initiatives such as the Loss and Damage Fund, technical assistance, etc. When it comes to the economy, same as with the society, the Slovak youth would like to see a more sustainable economy where we not only incorporate principles of circular economy in all different relevant areas, but even mentioned the principles of degrowth, which means that except of only focusing on economic growth, we also prioritize environmental and social values in our economic systems, and also make stricter regulations, for example, for emissions to really reduce them. When it comes to more of a local level, the Slovak youth see a lot of potential in this bottom-up approach from cities, because cities is where we live, and if we're able to create sustainable and circular cities, again, where the citizens are locally involved in all the policy processes in the urban areas, we're able to create cities that are able to adapt and mitigate climate change and be decarbonized. Further on, what many youth are frustrated with is that we keep making international agreements, but no one is really making sure or holding anyone accountable or making sure that these agreements are actually being met. And that's why the Slovak youth has proposed to create independent political institution nationally that would be solely responsible for making sure that all the agreements and measures in the climate area are being taken seriously and are being efficiently implemented. Thank you so much for listening. This was more of a perspective from our experiences in Slovakia. And now we are moving to our panel discussion, where I'm very honored to present our three panelists. We have Tejana Garlicka, who is a member of the Nordic Baltic Working Group on Climate and Environment. Welcome, Tejana. Then we have Alphonse Muya, who is the coordinator of African Youth Climate Assembly. Thank you for coming, Alphonse. And we have Unur Tordis Kristondottir, who is a youth delegate for Iceland to the UNFCCC. I will give a short round of introduction, so maybe if you can say more about yourself in like 2 sentences to introduce yourself to the audience.
Greetings everyone, it's a pleasure to be here today.
If you can hold it a bit closer.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Perfect. An introductory training on use of microphone was helpful, but maybe with more days in COP, I will be more experienced. Yes, pleasure being here, and really pleasure participating in the Nordic Baltic Youth Working Group, a process that really is very promising, but on this later. I myself have been engaged in Stockholm Plus 50 process, a youth task force, and some other colleagues like Alphonse, and those that we will be seeing in these days in COP have really contributed greatly to ensuring that this group, led by LSU, Nordic Baltic Youth Working Group, is an active one and leads to some concrete outcomes like the demands that were presented earlier today. I also am a regional vice chair for Western Europe at IUCN Commission on Education and Communication, co-chair on Youth and Intergenerational Partnerships in IUCN Commission on Education and Communication, and myself am actively engaged for quite a number of years in youth work in climate and environment. So thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Yeah, you can use your microphone.
Thank you. I think you already introduced me perfectly. I won't really delve deep in that. Just to say that I was privileged to serve in the Africa, in coordination of the Africa Youth Climate Assembly, that basically has been the youth engagement to the Africa Climate Summit, which was actually inaugural. And then I'm also serving in the UNEP Youth Constituency, the global steering committee of it. And through that is how we've been able to serve with Diana here in the Stockholm Plus 50 process. So pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Onur?
Yeah, my name is Unnur. I'm a UN Youth Delegate on Climate from Iceland. I'm also a young professional working in sustainability at a tech company called Controlant. So I come from also the private sector, so I see a need there for more collaboration for climate justice from the private sector as well, because the government cannot do it by itself. Yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you very much. So what is interesting here that we have quite an international panel, also with a view from Alfonso. So I will start with you. So listening to the demands presented by Amalie, what synergies do you see between the demands presented from the Nordic countries and the demands that you've worked out in the African Youth Climate Assembly? And from your consultations in the climate assemblies, what expectations do African youth have for decision makers in Europe, or more specific, Baltic and Nordic regions?
Thank you. I think those are really many questions, but I think I'll try to, because I was also privileged to be in Copenhagen when we were coming up with these recommendations. First of all, I can already start with, you mentioned the similarities that exist. I think in the Africa Youth Climate Assembly, we came up with 11 recommendations. I see in Copenhagen we have 10. so that's almost the same number of recommendations that we have there. But in the substantive elements of it, I think there are three main points that I'll highlight here, because I see a lot of, youth demands are almost the same from wherever, because we will always align with whatever young people are fronting from whichever part of the world, because I view them very progressive. They're really trying to give governments in check. They are trying to secure the future, which they will have to live in. But now looking at especially the first recommendation that you see in the recommendations that were presented here by Amalie, you'll find that there is a request it's actually not a request, I'll call it a demand, to recognize a working group on climate and environment. So basically, it's institutionalizing the youth engagement in climate and environment governance, which also forms the first demand that we had put forward in the Africa Youth Climate Assembly declaration when we were like calling to have institutionalized engagement of young people across all the process of climate and environmental governance. That has been a very big elephant in the room. We all have to agree on it, and we better craft a better way of getting ourselves there, because I think we've asked this for a very long time. Slowly, we are seeing some progress in it, but we are not yet there. I think there's more than we can really do to have young people meaningfully and the inclusion being very, very deliberate from the word go, not just being there to tick boxes and all that. Then the second thing I would say is investing in the youth. You've heard of one of the recommendations when she was mentioning something to do with funding young people to participate in such events like COP, for example, and other engagements. So for us, when we were putting together the Africa Youth Climate Declaration, there's an emphasis that we put in there for us to even have a green bank created, for example, not just to eventfully engage young people, but engage young people and give them the requisite tools for them to move the change, implement the ideas they already have, to scale up some of the solutions they are already leading within their communities and all that. And then you'll also realize that there's inclusivity demand. Now, I was there when our colleague from Sami community was giving us a very wonderful song and a very nice speech in Copenhagen. But we went further in the Africa Youth Climate Assembly to call for the deliberate inclusion of the minority groups, people with disability, indigenous people, women, like young women and girls. We've seen them being left behind for a very long time. So I would call this a very significant similarity when it comes to funding, inclusion, systematically engaging young people across all levels. And to me, there's it's like it's just the same. The declarations are just actually the same. It's only that I was pointing out some key sticky issues that I see they really need some fast delivery going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's also a very good point that you made, that actually what the youth is demanding globally is quite unified, maybe different in some regions, but I think the main demands are the same. Thank you very much. And then Diana. So you live in Lithuania, one of the 3 Baltic countries. And from your experience, why do you think is it important to arrive at a common position among youth in the Baltic and Nordic region? And do you feel that Nordic and Baltic youth face similar environmental challenges and have similar demands in relation to these challenges?
Thank you very much. Indeed, I am Ukrainian myself, but I've been living in Lithuania for the past 10 years already. And knowing the region, talking to young people in the region, those that are engaged specifically in environment protection, maybe an important thing to mention, I am one of the co-organizers of the regional COI in Eastern Europe that took place earlier this year, end of September in Warsaw, and having young people from all over Eastern Europe being there, including Baltics, of course. One of the interesting maybe less formal, but still observation and thing to pay attention to in a way is really that strong association of Baltic youth with the Nordic neighbors, as in considering who fits where, as in associating with certain culture and values and priorities of work, if you wish. Yes, Baltic youth representatives tend to have connection and interest really in working together with Nordic youth representatives. And the whole experience in Copenhagen as well, this event that we refer to, also really realigned and reinforced this interest in collaboration. And what has been happening in the working group, Nordic Baltic Youth Working Group, wasn't a thing that took place and made things happen for this conference in Copenhagen to be organized overnight. It's a long process that started, in fact, before Stockholm Plus 50, and some initiative youth and student organizations really initiated the group itself, and then as a conclusion of Stockholm Plus 50, moving on forward, the group only stayed stronger and more people joined it, really illustrating, manifesting in this way, this interest in working together in this Baltic Sea region, if you wish, on both sides of the Baltic Sea. And if you think of it, the negative impact of climate change cannot be, tamed within certain national borders. It's not a problem of one country or one continent or micro-region, and because the pollution doesn't stay within national borders of one country, even if that's the main polluter. The same goes for the collaboration, If we talk about the state of environment, loss of biodiversity, many different ecological problems in the Nordic Baltic region, as in Baltic Sea region. Yes, it's, the Baltic Sea that doesn't belong to one country only, and it cannot be waters of only this space, from left to right. We talk about the whole sea and all the countries that have access to it, and therefore very similar challenges that really maybe unite the youth in Nordic Baltic extended region, working on it together, and this unity and interest in including one another in the processes that are happening, working on it together, really, to me personally, as I observe it over the past several years, is very promising. I put lots of hopes in it myself personally. If you think of it, really, again, Nordic Baltic region is not so homogeneous, as in getting each other on board really means that you have representatives of youth from those countries that do not have a pavilion at COP, that may have more boundaries to come to these spaces. Funding included, and you can imagine that having this opportunity to share insights from the event as a recap meeting, online even, really, many things happen online these days. Peer learning, so many jointly produced documents like these demands, really make sure that this collaboration allows to engage those that have, say, less capacity, possibilities to be participating in other means. So I find it very promising and very inspiring, in fact. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also, thank you for the more hopeful message. And I think that was very interesting and important also what you said, that the climate crisis and all of these ecological issues that we're facing are transboundary, are transnational, and that actually very well links to what Onur is doing in her work. Because Onur, you are a member of the Icelandic delegation, and you advocate for the youth movement, both from the Icelandic perspective, but also globally. And so I would be interested in knowing what contexts are these common demands of the region well suited for, especially in your role. So if you work out demands on a regional level, who are you wanting to or willing to or to address? And also, which decision makers do you want them to reach and be implemented by? So yeah, in a brief, what you can do to promote these regional demands on a global level?
I think the demand that from the Nordic and Baltic youth demands that would be the best suited for Iceland, it would be showing global leadership in phasing out fossil fuels, because Iceland is a country powered by renewable energy, and through the decades has developed knowledge and valuable knowledge and the know-how on how to develop projects and financing them and operate. So the biggest way Iceland could help would be through energy transition towards phasing out fossil fuels. And I think this is also connected to the gender point in our demands. We want to ensure a common demand on ensuring a solidary and just transition. And I think because we need to scale up the energy industry, and it will triple in the coming years, but still the energy sector is mainly consisting of men or men. So we need to have more education for females in this regards. We need to have more representation in female in the sector. I think now the energy sector is around 25% women, maybe. But this sector will triple, so we need to use all of humanity to be able to put forward this energy transition with both genders and all genders, of course. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all participants. I think, at least for me, it was very inspiring to hear perspectives from different youth delegates and also from different backgrounds, maybe. Because, yes, of course, often what's happening on the global policy level can be very frustrating, maybe not what we're expecting to happen, but for me it gives me hope to see that youth globally is connected and determined to really ask for more and to engage in these topics. And with this, I would like to open to the audience to see if there are some questions for the panelists. And we have... Now is your chance, one and only chance. Yes. Maybe... I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah. You can maybe shortly introduce yourself and then, or where you're from, and then...
My name is Mwindi. Maingi, I'm from Kenya.
Need to hold it closer.
Mwindi. Yes. My name is Mwindi Maingi, I'm from Kenya. We served with the Heart Stockholm Plus 50. The last time I saw you was in Sweden, right? And that time we were talking on finance. I don't know if there is a policy that's being pushed from the Nordic side on to cushion youth during wars and financing on climate projects. Yes, that's my question.
Okay.
I'm asking.
Yes, no, is it?
Okay, due to climate change, there is a displacement of youth because of war, climate change, and in Stockholm, there was a side event on pushing on policies on financing and to cushion youths during such instances like wars, climate change. Is there any more push from the Nordic side on such policies from the Nordic?
Maybe you can pass.
Then we will figure out the system on the microphones. But to be very honest, I wouldn't have the data to answer back to you specifically on funding. But the fact that this conference in Copenhagen was supported, right? So much more awareness is being created about the fact that there is a lack of funding and that there is a need to particularly thoughtfully, strategically engage young people. I think really makes it a more known problem and a more discussed issue that I myself really am probably a positive thinker, and I see shift happening. I also try to, always when being critical about youth topics, think of how was the situation 5-10 years back, and it was a very different situation. So I really think we're progressing on quite many points on the youth inclusion and meaningful youth engagement. But maybe Uno has some reflections as well, do you, on the funding part or like better inclusion from Nordic side?
Yeah, I think also in Iceland there's 2 UN youth delegates, but only one is funded to attend COP. So I think the funding needs to be increased also in the Nordics. but more importantly also in this global south. But in Iceland, we're fortunate enough to have a lot of youth inclusion even in the ministry. So I think one of the ministers is around 30 years old. Same for another minister. So I think we're on the way, but we're not there quite yet.
Okay, thank you. Is there another question? Yes. I think it's best if you just come for the microphone.
So thank you. I'm from Bangladesh. I was following all of your thoughts.
Maybe
And
you
I
can
think
put-
that the thing is that it's not about Nordic or it's not about other any specific countries. It's about world. Like as a Bangladeshi youth, we have a platform, we have a youth organization, and we are trying to inspiring youth in Bangladesh as we are a big team. So we are trying to educate our youth that how we could work on this. So I think that we should have some opportunities to exchange our, exchange our knowledge. It don't need financial support. It don't need fundings. But all we could do this. That first thing, what we should need to know about what's going on. Like when it's about Bangladesh, I don't know about your countries. In Bangladesh, we the youth are not that much aware that what's going on. We are the seventh. Number seventh country when it's about the vulnerability, but we are polluting less than 0.52% carbon dioxide. So like thing is that we are not all we could do this. I have a request to all of you that if there is any possibility to collaborate and exchange our knowledge, to exchange our youth experience, that could be better for all of us. So I would ask that have there any opportunities to collaborate with any youth organization from Nordic or some other places with Bangladeshi youth, so that we could we could improve our knowledge together. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, would you like to answer?
Yes, I think it's not a question as such, but I have a reaction on your thoughts, and I think, like, to be honest, there's a lot of responsibility the Nordic and Baltic region takes for the climate crisis that we are in currently, and the people better placed to hold the leadership accountable for this are the youth, and now it even sits so well when the youth from that particular country holds their leadership accountable to take responsibility of the historical responsibility of their region to the contribution towards the climate crisis that we have currently. And then by that, we will be able to deliver on the and move away from the dishonesty that we've had within the landscape of climate governance as it looks today. So that is something I already raised in Copenhagen to the leadership that was there, but also to the young people. It's a responsibility of the youth to really hold their governments accountable. And I give you a plus for always doing that so perfectly. But again, also encouraging collaborations. Like, there were a number of us from Africa in the meeting in Copenhagen, and we brought the perspectives, having the Africa Youth Climate Assembly preceding the meeting that we had in Copenhagen. There are so many lessons to learn from there. And now if we can have such kind of knowledge exchange kind of avenues, and again, also showcasing what young people are really doing from different contexts, it's good also to have solutions tailored for a specific region and context. And that's why regional congregations like those are very important. But again, there's so much as well to learn from various regions across the world. So thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you very much. I think these were also important words, also a bit motivating to just recognize the role that we can play as youth. And for sure, it would be amazing to collaborate as much as we can. We can also maybe talk about it more after, where we have time to network a bit more. And now for the concluding remarks, we have Elizabeth Wantuti, a climate activist from Kenya, among us, who would like to give the concluding remarks. Is she here? Do we know? Thank you very much. I think I will give you the space here if you want.
Hi, everyone. Hi, sorry, I had already delegated to somebody to take my place because I have to be in another session right now speaking. But just allow me to really thank the Nordic and Baltic Youth Group for the solidarity. I think for us, it's more of a message of solidarity and how young people are stepping up and showing up and coming together to demonstrate that power of collective action. It's a power that we don't often see out there. But for young people from different regions, we are showing that solidarity. We are coming together and championing the diverse voices that we need to see in these spaces at COP. And COP28, for instance, is a COP that, was very much highlighted about inclusion. And for us, inclusion is about how we can be able to make sure that we have diverse voices, we have communities, we have young people, we have children, and we also have the voices of the communities and nations that are the most vulnerable to this crisis at the center of it all, and not just in terms of having their voices heard, but also in terms of making sure that their voices are part and parcel of the decisions that are being made in these rooms. So the declaration that we had at the African Youth Climate Assembly is very much aligned with the asks from the Nordic and Baltic youths. And I think one of the key issues that we really brought out during the assembly is, number one, the need to have young people systematically embedded within the existing decision-making frameworks. This is something that does not exist, and a lot of times young people are most often watching from the sidelines and are not maybe present in the rooms where the decisions are being made. And I think having that power of collective action, coming out strongly as young people and saying that these are our demands, this is what we want to see, this is the kind of future that we want to be able to be part of, I think is the most important and powerful thing that we are going to do at this COP. So as we start this COP, mine is just that call for us to continue amplifying our voices as one, to continue uniting our voices so that we can be heard louder and clear, because for us to have, that concrete and that strong link and have our decisions within the decisions that are being made within this space, we must be present in those rooms where the decisions are being made. So I think let's keep up with that solidarity, and most importantly, we have the aspect of continuity. I think when we did the African Youth Climate Assembly, the whole aspect was not just having a 3 days assembly, but creating a platform and an opportunity for young people to connect, to have that solidarity, and to continue engaging in the decision-making frameworks. So we hope to collaborate, to partner, and to continue to keep that conversation to a point where we can be able to empower our young people. And empowerment of our young people has to go beyond just having their voices in the platforms, but also in terms of how we can build our in-country movements from where we're coming from, so that when we come to the COPs, when we come to these global platforms, we already have a very good leverage as young people to champion for that which we want to see. So I think this is a clear demonstration that we know what we want, and we are standing up, we're stepping up, and collectively, I think we will be that force that will make that change happen at this COP. So I just want to wish everybody all the best at COP, and welcome you to our events at the Youth Assembly, and also to keep championing the key things that we want to see at this COP, and appreciate you so much. I would have loved to speak more, but I have to run a far distance to another event, but thank you so much for understanding.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for these very powerful words. I think those are very, very good closing remarks as well. I would just, to close up the session, I would thank everyone again for coming, also for all the participants, and also Elizabeth for taking your time. I think it's important for all of us to just sit with what has been just said and just embrace the role that the youth is playing internationally, but also in our own countries, to hold our governments and institutions accountable. And yeah, with this, I would like to conclude the session, and a round of applause for all the participants, but also for all of us who are engaged in climate things.
Hello, everyone. We're here in COP28 in Dubai with some great speakers, Alice and Juan, from Colombia and Sweden. So, to start this space, we're going to talk about the importance of youth engagement in conferences like COP28 and in general. I would like a brief introduction from you, Juan. Could you please introduce yourself?
Hola, hola a todos y a todas quienes están aquí. Mi nombre es Juan David Amaya, yo tengo 17 años y soy activista por la justicia y la acción climática en mi país.
Hi everyone that is here. My name is Juan David Amaya, and his name is Juan David Amaya, and I'm climate activist for justice, climate justice.
Soy campeón para la tierra de UNICEF en Latinoamérica y el Caribe y actualmente cofundador de Pachamama, un movimiento climático que lucha en defensa de la vida, el territorio y la paz.
He is a climate activist from UNICEF and a co-founder of the organization Life of Pachamama, an organization that works toward the defense of life and the territory.
Thank you, Juan. Now, welcome, Alice.
Thank you. I'm also a climate activist from Sweden. I've been active in Fridays for Future, Climate Live, and Fältbiologerna, which is a national youth organization in Sweden. But currently I'm also one of the 2 youth representatives for Sweden in the Swedish delegation to COP28.
Great. So to start this panel, there's the Escazú Agreement, that is an agreement for Latin America and the Caribbean that focuses on climate and human rights. It's the first agreement in the world that addresses these 2 issues together. So to start, we know that the Escazú Agreement has 3 pillars: access to information, public participation, and justice in environmental matters. Following these objectives that the Escazú Agreement has, what do you think is the intersectionality between climate and human rights?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Yes. I think climate and human rights has everything with each other to do. All of the different global goals on human rights are tightly interlinked with the consequences of climate change. As climate change worsens, as the climate crisis escalates, all of these goals will be harder to reach, and the people's rights to their basic human rights will be more and more threatened in basically all regions, when it comes from everything from access to food and water to the right to education and personal health. So I think they have everything to do with each other, and also intersectionality, in that these different these different threats to different parts of human rights usually also escalate each other together with the climate crisis, especially if you're already in a specifically vulnerable group.
Great, thank you, Alice. What about you, Juan? What's your perspective on this?
Cuando hablamos de justicia climática, también estamos hablando de justicia social. Estamos hablando de justicia racial. Estamos hablando de una justicia universal, justa para todos.
When we are talking about human rights, we are also talking about climate justice and human rights for everyone.
la justicia en un ámbito entre nosotros como jóvenes nos abarca, nos compete en diferentes campos. Cuando hablamos del cómo nos afecta la crisis climática, tenemos que empezar a ver las diferencias que hay entre nosotros.
The climate justice affects everything about us young people. When we talk about climate justice, we need to talk about young people and how it is affecting us.
Sabemos que todos nos vemos afectados por este problema, por esta crisis humanitaria, pero no de la misma manera.
We know that everyone is being affected by this climate crisis, but definitely not in the same way.
Y ahí es donde viene la interseccionalidad, el cómo nosotros observamos los impactos que provienen y cómo a su vez se relacionan con los diferentes componentes de las personas de nuestros entornos, de las personas que históricamente se han visto marginadas por el sistema capitalista, extractivista y colonialista.
There is what comes intersectionality. When we see how this climate crisis, this world crisis, affects the vulnerable communities, especially through the capitalistic system and the colonialism, historic colonialism.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your answer. I would like to know more about the projects you're working on. If you have any ongoing project or initiative that relates to this topic, the connection between climate and human rights.
Should I begin again?
Yes.
Yes?
Please.
Well, like both from what Juan said and also my previous response, I think that everything, when you working with the climate crisis, everything related to it is related to human rights and social justice. So I think any project about that directly should be connected to human rights. I can't mention any specific project, but I try to, in every part of my advocacy work, in my activism, to include the human perspective, whether that is with different campaigns in Fridays for Future or when we're talking to the Swedish delegation and trying to raise the concerns of youth when it comes to climate change and climate crisis. So I have no specific project, but I think this is a perspective that I try to bring to all my work and my advocacy work about climate justice, because it is, in the end, it's about social justice and about human rights.
Okay, great. So I would like to make a specific question if the work you've done as a Swedish youth delegate. Tell us about the challenges you've had and about how has this experience nurtured and contributed to your climate activism.
I think often when youth try to gain access to these formal settings, we often face many of the same challenges, even though we have a formalized role that we're part of the Swedish delegation. Coming from the activist space, I felt that I don't have the efficient knowledge. I don't know the technical terms. I feel like my experiences and my knowledge is not valued the same as the rest of the delegation, and therefore that makes it hard to speak up and say what you're thinking, because you feel like the other people in the room have a certain way of speaking that you don't quite know yet. So that's been a challenge, to still have the bravery to take place in these rooms. Even though I have a spot there, it's still hard to feel that what you're saying is taken seriously, because of being a young person and coming from a grassroots organizing and not from more of a formal setting, working in, for example, Youngo or these big groups that have a lot of experience with the UN or these high-level So that's one thing. And I think also it's always hard to reach out and also trying to really connect with the young people in Sweden and get their perspectives. We worked a lot with that, but it's you can only reach out and you never know how much response you will get, because that's on the other side, the other party's responsibility. You can only try to reach out and hope they respond. So that was also a struggle at times.
Okay. Okay, very interesting and really nice work what you do as a delegate for this. Okay, now Juan, going back to the last question, tell me about the projects that you're working on currently, connecting climate action and human rights.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Gabriela. Uno de los proyectos más significativos
one of the most significant projects that we have been working on
que hemos trabajado de la mano con Pachamama ha sido el primer campamento
the first camp
por la justicia climática interseccional liderado por jóvenes para jóvenes en Colombia.
For the intersectional climate justice led by youth people and for youth people.
Este escenario involucró jóvenes y adolescentes de todo el país, centrado en la ciudad de Villavicencio para hablar de justicia climática y cómo nos está afectando ahora.
This scenario involves youth people of all the country, all gathered in Villavicencio, a rural city of Colombia, for talk about climate justice and human rights.
Donde entre todos unificamos nuestras voces e implementamos acciones colectivas y demandas que hoy están siendo trasladadas ante la COP28 en Emiratos Árabes Unidos.
In which we all gathered and raised our voices to have a main position that we can bring here to the COP28 and being discussed with other civil society and government of all over the world.
Este ha sido un proceso significativo en nuestro país para los jóvenes y para todos aquellos que participamos y que luchamos en defensa de la vida, del territorio y la paz.
This has been a significant process for we all work in climate justice and in defense of life and the territories.
Thank you. Very interesting, the climate justice camp. It's an interesting proposal that I think maybe could be implemented in Sweden. Why not?
Why not?
Yes, great. Now, tell me about the demands you have. What demands do you have as a young person worried about the future generations and our present? What demands do you have for the decision makers that are currently united not so far away from us?
I think my first and maybe most simple demand would be follow up on what you've already promised, do what you said that you're going to do, and start doing the real hard work, because there's really no time to daddle around anymore. Even if the nation's pledges from the Paris Agreement are fully met, we're still heading towards a global warming at best 2.5 degrees. And that's way too much. So that's the most simple. Do what you already said that you're going to do. And going deeper, make sure that these efforts are inclusive, just, that they're making space for people of the most vulnerable groups to be heard and their perspectives included, that there's no climate action has to be just, otherwise it is just continuing the problem that caused it in the beginning. And as well that we need hard, clear decisions on phasing out all fossil fuels as fast as possible.
I agree. This last point is crucial to achieve the goals that already exist. What about you, Juan? What are your demands and your demands from Pachamama?
Históricamente hablando,
Historically talking,
nuestras voces
our voices
como niños,
as children
adolescentes
and youth
y jóvenes se han visto
has been
marginadas y
marginalized
excluidas
and
de las
excluded
negociaciones globales.
from the global negotiations.
Exigimos
We demand
a nuestros
our
gobiernos
governments,
nuestra presencia,
our presence,
que no hablen de nosotros
that they
sin
don't talk about
nosotros
us
en la
without
mesa.
us in the table.
Hoy
Today,
somos el presente
we are the present,
y debemos de construir acciones colectivas
and we should build collective actions
para transformar
to
nuestro
transform
futuro.
our future.
Es necesario
It's necessary
que las próximas políticas
that
que
the next
creemos
policies that we create
nos involucren en la
involves
toma de
us in the decision
decisiones.
making.
Exigimos y
We demand
proponemos
and propose,
crear escenarios,
create scenarios,
procesos y
processes and
proyectos
projects
que nos permitan a nosotros garantizar nuestros derechos, que
that
nos
let us
permitan
to
ser veedores
guarantee our
y que a su
rights,
vez incidir en estas
and
demandas.
at the same time make an incidence in these demands.
Thank you very much, Juan. Really interesting. I agree with all of your demands. Now, I would like to turn to the next question, which is related to the importance of the cooperation between the global north and global south. So many times what happens is that we talk about, the global north, and we forget that we're one. Like, it's not north or south. So how can we connect? How can we cooperate? How can we make our demands a demand that is unified? How can we unite our message?
I think something that you already said is very key, that we have to remember that we're all in the same, not in the same circumstances, but we are all tackling similar problems with how to do these major changes to our society that we really need to see at this point. And I think in the youth movement, there are really good examples that also could be followed by world leaders, where young people from all over the world come together, and also that the groups from, as myself, as a person from Sweden, from a privileged background, that we also are very mindful about listening and giving space to the voices that so long have been ignored and have been not respected. So I think if that is something that has to be at the center of increasing a global, or decreasing the divide between the global north and the global south, and also focusing again on what brings us together. I think, because so often we get stuck in the small details and the small things that we do not agree on, but there's so much that we actually do have in common, that we do agree on, and bringing those up more, I think, can be very helpful in moving forward, and finding, seeing it as a collective fight. We're not doing it on behalf of someone else. We're doing it together because we have a collective cause and a collective fight that we need to do together, united, not in division.
I agree. Yes, it is really important that we recognize the importance of collaboration, no matter the geographic place you're coming from. What about you, Juan? What do you have to say about this?
Antes de dividir un sur
Before
y un
divide
norte,
north and a south,
tenemos que reconocer
we should recognize
que todos
that
somos
we all
personas,
are people.
somos humanos,
We are humans.
tenemos niños,
We have children,
jóvenes,
youth,
mujeres y
women,
familias
and families
que coexistimos
that
y
coexist
compartimos un
and
mismo
share
planeta.
a same planet.
El norte y el sur
The north and the south
deben de trabajar juntos
should work together
para vencer
in
esta
order to
crisis humanitaria
fight
global.
against the humanitarian global crisis.
esta crisis climática
this climate crisis
que nos está afectando ahora, que nos
that is
está
affecting
afectando a
us
todos.
today, that is affecting all of us.
La colaboración
The collaboration
es crucial
is crucial
en este momento.
in this moment.
Juntos debemos de unificar nuestros
Together we should
esfuerzos
unify
para
our
lograr
efforts
las metas,
in order to
para
accomplish the
lograr
goals,
esos objetivos de desarrollo
to accomplish
sostenible
the
tan
global
ambiciosos que
SDGs
tenemos.
that we have.
Great. Now, well, we've talked about the demands, we've talked about human rights. Now, what is the importance of including youth in spaces such as COP? Why are we here? You know, like, why do you think, or what do you think is your role? And what are your plans for these days? How would we be able to connect with other young people? And what do you have to say about this?
Currently, young people in the UN's definition, it's from 15 to 30, I think. And if you also include those below 15, we are a very clear majority of the world's population. Therefore, our voices count, not just because youth and young and children usually also are a lot more affected by the climate crisis, but it's also we're in majority of the world's population. Because our age does not mean that we have less to say, that our knowledge is less valid, that our experiences are less valid than those who are older. So I think that's why youth matters. And youth also have often a lot more of an inventive, creative way to say things than those who have already been teached into the system, teached into how things should work, how they usually work. Young people, the younger you are, the less of that notion you have already been formed into. So young people are not only usually more open to see new ways of working together and collaborating, but we've also shown that we're a huge force and that we're demanding action, and therefore we have a very crucial role and should be included in these high-level formal settings of decision-making that ultimately impact the whole world's population, our own future, not only future generations, but already the generations that are living today. And how we do that, I think coming together, discussing, having collective demands, as we already do. There's the Global Youth Statement. There are several different statements from different groups that collaborate. I also think, even though I've struggled in my role as a youth representative, I think having a national youth representative in the national delegation is a really good way to ensure that youth's voices are always at the table where negotiations are being made. Even if I don't have I can't negotiate, I don't have that role. Being in that room and having such a formalized role, that means that youth perspective always will be included in the national delegation, I think is also really important. And making also enhancing the possibility for children to participate as well, not only, and make it more inclusive for children.
I totally agree with that last part especially, because we talk about youth, we talk about future generations, but we forget many times about children, you know, like children learn really fast, and we have to go to children and promote environmental education, climate education, because children are the future. So that's really important. What about you, Juan? So the question is, what is the importance of youth participation in spaces such as COP? And what can we do in these spaces?
Ok. Como lo había mencionado,
as I was saying,
nosotros acogimos el primer campamento por la
did
justicia
the first
climática
camp of
en
climate
Colombia.
justice in Colombia.
De ello, acogimos diferentes
From
resultados
there,
y
we bring
análisis que
different
hoy
perspectives that
están
today
aquí en la
are
COP.
here in COP.
De los principales que podemos dar como resultados que tienen
The
impactos
main ones that have
significativos,
really impactful results.
concluimos la inclusión de las infancias, las adolescencias y las
We
juventudes
mentioned
en
the
este
children
escenario,
and
en
youth
este tipo de escenarios.
in these scenarios.
La participación activa y la inclusión de género durante las negociaciones.
The significant action of youth and gender in these scenarios.
Y a su vez,
And at the same time,
la implementación de acciones colectivas que nos permitan generar escenarios de diálogos y concertación entre los jóvenes y los gobiernos para la implementación de políticas públicas en nuestros países.
the collective action between youth, civil society, and governments to make real changes in our territories.
Los jóvenes tenemos ideas innovadoras. Los jóvenes representamos el futuro, representamos las acciones del presente para la construcción de un futuro.
The youth have significant voices to bring to the table to put new perspective into the future.
Nuestros pensamientos e ideales en las salas de negociaciones son cruciales para concretar las metas que tenemos establecidas.
Our positions and ideas are highly important to put into the negotiation scenarios to bring new ideas.
No pueden hablar de nosotros sin nosotros.
They cannot talk about us without us.
Thank you very much. It's really interesting because we were at an event in Colombia, and what a representative from the COP presidency mentioned was that this COP was a COP in which they wanted to bring to the table people that were never in the table or have not been in the table. So it's really good that you're here, that you're participating in COP. Maybe you've been in past COPs, but I think this one's a really important COP because we're in the midpoint, as we all know, since the SDGs were established. So this is the moment, and I really want to thank you for your work. It's amazing. Congratulations for everything you do. I hope everything that's been talked here in COP actually happens in your countries. We all hope that. And now I want to move to one question that I think it's a question that it's really important because we talk about climate change, disasters and everything, but we might sometimes lose hope. And we cannot lose hope because this is a struggle we have to fight and we have to win. Because if we do not win, then who is going to win? We have to do it. So what is the hope message you have to tell to the youth? And what hope message do you have for everyone who's listening to us?
Hope is hard, but I think my message of hope would be, look at how far we've come. As I said in the beginning, I come from grassroots organizing, from activism, from screaming on the streets, chanting, demonstrating, and many say, well, that doesn't make any difference. But if you look at, for 10 years ago, how the international dialogue about climate was at that time, climate justice was not on the agenda the way it is today. That's thanks to the youth movement. That's thanks to the many hardworking young people and children that have been demonstrating, organizing, educating themselves and other people about that we have to have an intersectionality perspective on climate, and we have to talk about climate justice. And I think that's easy to forget. We are always looking forward. We never look back. We never see that we've actually made changes. And these are changes that are hard to measure, so it's easily to say, well, how can we know? But there has been a change in how we talk about these issues, and there has been a change in the media attention they get. There has been a change in the way that politicians from all parties now have to have climate politics. They can't not have it as they could 10 years ago. So I think that's hope, and for me, hope is also seeing other young people. That's always my biggest source of hope. How we always show up, and we show up for each other, and we keep fighting no matter how many backlashes we've had.
Amazing, amazing. What about you, Juan? What's your hope message?
Históricamente hablando, los jóvenes somos disrupción.
The youth are disruptive.
Los jóvenes somos el cambio.
The youth are the change.
Los jóvenes hemos hecho el cambio.
The youth has been the change.
Mi esperanza es llegar aquí y observar que como yo,
My hope
como
is that
nosotros,
I have arrived here
como nuestros
and as
colega,
us,
sin importar nuestro color de piel,
without matter or color skin,
nuestra religión
or religion,
o de dónde vengamos,
or where we're from,
tenemos un mismo mensaje.
we have a same message.
Justicia climática.
Climate justice.
Venimos aquí a exigir
We come
una
here
justicia
to demand justice
por nuestro territorio,
for our territory,
por nuestro pueblo,
for our people,
por nuestra gente que está en nuestras
that
casas,
is
en
in
nuestras
our
familias,
houses, in our families,
sufriendo de primera mano
suffering
estas
of
problemáticas
first
que
hand
hoy nos está dejando la crisis humanitaria global.
these issues that global climate crisis is causing.
Mi esperanza es
My
el
hope
ver
is to see
cómo hoy
how
niños, jóvenes y adolescentes se
children, youth
movilizan
is
a nivel
mobilizing
global
globally
frente a la crisis climática global, frente a la crisis climática que nos está atendiendo en este momento.
into the actual climate crisis.
Cada uno de ustedes, cada persona,
Each of
desde donde
us
nos mire, que se está movilizando,
that is mobilizing,
inspira
inspire
a un planeta mejor,
to a
un
better
planeta más
planet,
justo,
a
resiliente
more just planet,
para todos.
and resilient for
Eso
all.
es lo que yo determino como esperanza.
That is what I call hope.
Great. Thank you very much. A round of applause for Alice and Juan, and our translator, Thomas. Thank you very much. Now, we'll move to the questions. Does anyone have any question? No questions? Great. Does anyone have a question for our audience? Oh. Yes, yes, you can use the microphone. Great. Or maybe you can come here, please. Great.
I just wanted. Oh, can you hear me? Yes. I just wanted to say that you're very inspirational. I'm turning 30 this winter, and I'm feeling not old, I would say, but a bit like, you know, I'm still crossing into a different section of my life, you know, and I guess I'm a regular adult from then on. So I just wanted to ask, like, do you have a message to all the young adults or the youth who, you know, turn older? Like, how can we keep on strengthening the youth movement without, you know, taking over, or I don't know, but how can we be good allies?
That's a great question. Yeah.
Do you want to start, or should?
En mi pueblo,
in my town,
yo crecí en un entorno donde el
grew up
conocimiento
in an environment
se
in which
pasaba de los mayores
the
hacia los
knowledge
más
passed
pequeños.
through the ancient ones to the young people.
Se nos enseñaba lo que se aprendió a través de la experiencia.
They teach us what it was known from the experience.
Se nos contaba
They told us how
nos habíamos preparado
they
o
have been
cuáles habían
prepared
sido los
or
resultados
which
de las
has been
acciones.
the results of the actions, of the past actions.
Hoy científicos
today
que durante
scientists
años
that
han
for years
investigado este
have been
tema,
researching this topic,
tienen esa misión de
have the
compartir el
mission to share the knowledge
de
with the
permitirnos
generation,
generar acciones
to allow
colectivas
us
entre
to
nosotros
make collective
para seguir
actions
contrarrestando este
to
problema.
follow tackling this problem.
El trabajo unificado
The
nos permitirá
unified work
finalmente
would let us
lograr los objetivos que tenemos
accomplish the
establecidos.
goals that we have.
El fortalecimiento hacia las propuestas
The strengthening
juveniles,
to the youth proposals,
el permitir levantar nuestras voces e
the
incidir
raising
en estos
of the
escenarios
youth
de
voices,
participación
and come to these scenarios
son una solución clave
is a
frente
key
a tu
solution
pregunta.
from your question.
I my addition, I guess, would be also don't stop being like taking the uncomfortable fights, being the annoying voice in the room, just because you feel like that's not the role of your age group. Never minimize your voice because of the expectations of others around you. And say the uncomfortable truth that needs to be heard, but also open the doors for people younger than you that you would have wanted help opening when you were that age. And pay it backwards, or whatever to say, like keep in touch with who you were when you were younger, and how would that person today have wanted help from someone who was older. Like I said about my experience, often only language is a huge thing. Like just making the language more inclusive, not taking for granted that everyone knows these very complex abbreviations for every technical term, and saying the real terms and explaining them can help a lot. When there's the opportunity, give up the space to someone who wouldn't get it otherwise.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here and for listening to these experiences that Alice and Juan have to share with all of us. So we hope you continue enjoying COP, and let's hope that after COP we have great news on the decisions that are made. See you soon. Bye.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Climate Activist Hub. The plan for today is that we're going to have 2 presentations of youth demands, and then afterwards we're going to have an interactive workshop where we're going to kind of make our own posters based on the demands that have been presented today. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to have a longer introduction to that. Our first presenter is David, Austrian youth delegate, who will present the European Youth Delegate demands.
Thank you so much, Amelie. Thanks for the invite. So happy to be here. I'm very honored, to be honest, to introduce to you the demands from national youth delegates from Europe to COP28, which is quite a mouthful, but it's also quite a wonderful thing that has sort of happened over the last year or so, where this special community has been formed. And it's a community of youth delegates all across Europe who are part of their own national delegations. And together, we have spent the last few months in the lead up to COP formulating common demands. And the demands right now are co-created and co-signed by 22 signatories. It's actually 23 by now, so this has changed in the last few hours already. 11 countries. It's about 8 policy pages packed with information and across 7 broad themes, and I'll outline them in just a second. But maybe first, just to briefly outline the process as well, because I think it's quite special. So in total, I mean, you know, as you do, you set up a Google Doc and you hope that everyone sort of contributes, and it's very true, everyone did contribute. There was over close to 500 comments made and close to 400 suggestions of text and of building blocks that then ultimately formed the statements, and of course countless, I couldn't even count them, Zoom calls, as well as one meeting in person in Copenhagen just a few weeks ago, which was very special, not just for making the youth demands happen, but also just in general to network with other European youth delegates. So I just want to go right in, because I feel like ultimately we are fighting for more youth participation, but we're not doing that as a sort of ends in and of itself. We're doing it because we have stuff to say about all the topics that are being negotiated here at COP28, or at least most of them. And of course, in mitigation, we think that it's very important for European negotiators to spend the next 2 weeks really outlining ambitious positions that keep 1.5 alive and that take the historic responsibility on the European continent seriously. The climate crisis, of course, is a fossil fuel crisis, and as such, our position paper outlines that we need to tackle this head-on via a dedicated agenda item, which we didn't quite get, but we at least have the agenda item of the global stocktake, and under the global stocktake this is being negotiated, and we are really pushing for a full, fair, fast, and funded phase-out of all fossil fuels. Going over to another large topic, of course, which we've seen some news on in the last 24 hours, is the Loss and Damage Fund. The EU must take an active role in the operationalization of this fund, which it has to some extent done. And acknowledging the EU's historic responsibility, of course, what we're now pushing for in the next few hours and days, and what is really important is that substantial contributions from all EU member states and non-EU European countries are being made to this fund. This is a very serious demand, and we are spending hours and hours every day talking to negotiators, trying to make this happen. As well as that, we are also pushing for more youth participation at UNFCCC conferences. Why? Because this conference is deciding and negotiating our collective future. And it's not just the right thing to do to have us at the table, it's really our right to be at the table as young people. And as such, we demand funded and youth-led and representative youth delegate programs for every EU member state. Some of us are very fortunate in that we have these programs, but not every member state has youth delegate programs so far, which also explains that not all EU states have been able to sign this position paper. So we're really pushing for that as well. And last but very much not least, in all these measures, whether it's on mitigation, but especially also loss and damage, climate protection, climate adaptation, we think it's very important that the EU and non-EU European states really put human rights, poverty reduction, and gender equality at the center of their negotiations and of their texts that they are negotiating here. So this is just very briefly some of the, for me personally, highlights of our common demand paper. I invite you all to visit the website where we've put this demand paper online. You can read through it. I really encourage you to do so. I think it's very substantial. We've included a lot of sources. We've included lots of different topics and themes. And thank you so much for the opportunity to present this today. And with that, I hand it over to you.
So much. Hello, can you hear me? Thank you so much. And very interesting demands. I'm going to talk about the Global Youth Statement, which is on a global scale. It's the Global Youth Statement, or in short, the GYS, is a statement synthesizes the collective demands of children and youth, both of them across the world, to the global leaders, in order to bring about the swift changes at COP28. It is usually done by YOUNGO, the Children and Youth Constituency of the UNFCCC. This statement is an annual statement, policy document, developed each year to the policymakers at the COPs and SPs, holding them accountable to their commitments and demanding immediate, systemic, and radical action for climate justice. So the process of developing the Global Youth Statement is a one-year process. We collect inputs. It's the most inclusive and representative policy document for youth. So that's why we ensure that we collect demands from everyone, inputs from everyone. We first begin with the working groups of YOUNGO, which are thematic groups: health, agriculture, adaptation, mitigation. They try to set the frame of the Global Youth Statement.
Then we try to collect inputs from institutions like Yango, other sister constituency, women and gender constituency, and other institutes. And then we also open forum for individuals just to submit their inputs in case they are not evaluated with any institute or organization. And then there are two things called the local conference of the youth and regional conference of the youth. They are under the mandate of Yango, the youth and children constituency of the UNFCCC. They happen LCOIs. We had more than 100 LCOIs this year in each country, local conference of youth. And we also have regional conference of youth in the 6 regions. We get their outcomes and their inputs, and we also incorporate them in this process. So you can imagine the amount of the inputs. We received 750,000 inputs to the Global Youth Statement. After we received them all, the policy team, which is us, the policy team of Yango, we're trying to analyze these inputs, putting them into themes, into structures, and such things. And then we organize hackathons, which are gathering of youth to start structuring these demands in a UN language that goes in the tracks with the negotiations. And then we finalize the document. Some key facts about the Global Youth Statement, in case you have never heard about it. The formulation process of the Global Youth Statement is participative, inclusive, and representative, as I just mentioned, of children and youth from around the world. Work began early this year, the beginning of each year, and finalized before the COP. This year, we collected over 50,000 hours of work. You can imagine. Also, some key facts: the Global Youth Statement integrates inputs from children and youth from more than 150 countries, and policy statements from the local and regional conferences of youth that I just mentioned, LCOIs and ARCOIs. The Global Youth Statement this year has 18 thematic areas: adaptation, mitigation, loss and damage, governance, just these negotiated and non-negotiated tracks, presenting specific climate policy demands. It's very specific and very concrete, and it's very specific to who its target. Is it target a specific party or the UNFCCC or so on? Inputs were synthesized through 15 policy hackathons. The Global Youth Statement is recognized by the UNFCCC, and it's usually mentioned in the cover decision. Going back to COP21 in Paris, there was mention for youth and their efforts for the Global Youth Statement in the cover decision. Also in COP26 and Glasgow Climate Back, they were mentioning and some urging and quoting from the Global Youth Statement to include youth in their national delegations, this thing. And also lastly, last year in the COP27 Sharm el-Sheikh implementation plan, there was also recognition for the first youth-led climate forum and other things that are about children and youth, like ACE, Climate Action Plan. So you can see how impactful it is. So I'm just gonna go quickly in some of the inputs. It's over 80-page document. Just briefly gonna say one-liner demands from each thematic. We have children and youth theme. It's one theme from it: urge to ensure meaningful youth engagement and inclusion in climate decision making. For ACE, action for climate empowerment, close the finance gap for climate education and increase youth representation. For adaptation and resilience, find common ground on adaptation goals and prioritize inclusivity and just financing. For climate finance, our market, we also urge to transform the financial architecture, meet climate finance goals, and uphold the intergenerational equity. We also have a theme on climate justice and human rights, to recognize the 1.5 degrees Celsius goals, work collaboratively with youth, and condemn impunity for the crimes against defenders, the climate defenders and activists. There's also a theme on climate peace and security, address disproportionate impacts on vulnerable community and support climate migrants. These are demands written by youth to the world leaders. There's also a theme on conflict of interest, implement a robust policy to prevent conflicts of interest within the UNFCCC. In the energy theme, youth have demanded to commit to phasing out fossil fuel, redirecting funds to renewable and protecting conservative areas. On food and agriculture, youth have demanded to promote sustainable food system,
access to healthy food, and support agroecological practices. On governance, climate action plans, and global stocktake, which is happening this year in COP28, finalizing it, enhance climate action plans, support youth, and address debate sustainability. On health, take action on climate-related health issues and mental health, ensuring climate-resilient healthcare systems. On loss and damage, these are just one-liner demand, but each section has two pager. Loss and damage, accelerate action on loss and damage, prioritize grant-based funding, and involve youth in mechanisms. On mitigation, youth have demanded to implement ambitious mitigation program, cut methane emissions, and prioritize social aspects of mitigation. On nature and biodiversity, youth have demanded to ensure equitable community participation, integrate youth, and promote mutual well-being. On ocean and water, enhance corporate responsibility, adopt integrated approaches, and engage stakeholders. On economies, transforming economies, you have demanded to include just transition financing frameworks, standardize emission calculation, and promote science-based targets. On technology and innovation, foster collaboration between technology, finance, ensure equitable technology partnership, and assess technologies holistically. On women and gender, promote gender inclusion, invest in gender-responsive policies, and ensure universal access to reproductive health. These are just one-liner, very brief from the Global Youth Statement, but each theme from these 18 themes has over 2 pages, and the whole Global Youth Statement is over 80 pages, so you can imagine how inclusive and cool it is. If you want to read the Global Youth Statement, this is the one-pager. You can here find the one-pager, and here we have also a version of condensed demand, in case you can't read 80 pages, and step up to sign and support the Global Youth Statement by signing the petition, so the world leader can listen more to the youth demands. And thank you.
Okay, thank you so much to David and Watan. Great presentations. And now we're going on to the next part of the program, which is the interactive session. I think we should try to make 2 groups on the tables here. And the plan is really for you to go together and choose one of the demands that have been presented today and make a beautiful poster out of it. And, only, be creative. Use your fantasy. There are no limitations. Yes, and we will also try to have these posters hanging here to display them afterwards. So, okay, let's go.